we're actually going to look now at the development of each side over the last sort of few years. And, you know, you picked out some really interesting stuff from Real Madrid going back to the 2015-16 final, Dave.
I think that's the big thing with this Real Madrid team under Zidane. He doesn't get the credit where he should really get the credit. You know, people think he's just come in, he's got these superstars, he's dealing with the best player in the world in Cristiano Ronaldo, arguably over the last 3 seasons in the Champions League. But what you see with his tactics is they've really evolved. You know, the first sort of, you know, team that he's built is very much in a 4-3-3, playing quite direct wingers in Gareth Bale on the right-hand side and, of course, Ronaldo on the left-hand side, inverted wingers that were scoring goals. Bale was a really key part of that team where he carried the ball a lot on that right-hand side. But then again, the fullbacks will get high. You know, arguably have 3 guys in the penalty area that you can hit with crosses. And that side worked very well. It was combative, it was aggressive, it had Casemiro at the base of midfield. But it's arguably, you know, a team that could, you know, destroy you with the power and the pace out wide, which was different for the next year. You know, the next time they got to that Champions League final, completely different side. Zidane went away from that 4-3-3, moved to a 4-4-2 diamond. And with that, I think, opened up a real tactical aspect that meant that he could unlock a 4-4-2.
Was it Isco that was the key here?
So I think the big thing with you know, if you're playing a 4-4-2, that's probably the best pressing shape. It's the best defensive shape. One way to open that up is play a guy in between the lines, like Isco, as you mentioned. He's the guy that would arguably move into space. We'd drift left, he'd drift right, he'd go in between the strikers, he'd come deep. And that was the problem, that in a 4-4-2, if you're pressing with a flat 4, you've got this guy that's operating behind you. Opens up another sort of decision in your head. Do I need to check where this guy is? Do I need to use my shadow to block him? Which opened up space for Toni Kroos to dominate. Okay. And that's why this side was so good. That sort of development of an attacking midfielder that can roam with someone like Toni Kroos that drops, sits deep and can create from that deep area.
So are we saying that now Kroos has become, you know, in last season, sort of a deep-lying playmaker?
Yeah, I think obviously the first side, you know, very important there, but Modric and Kroos sort of played on the same line. They both got on the ball as much. I think what we're seeing as Kroos has evolved as a player is him being this deep-line playmaker that doesn't operate in a traditional deep-line playmaking position as a defensive midfielder, but arguably what he does, he drops between the midfield and the defence. When Marcelo pushes on, Marcelo will get into the final third, Carvajal will get into that final third, you'll have the 2 sitting and the 3 in front. And that opened up a little bit of space that Atletico Madrid, one of the best defensive teams in European football, their press is unbelievable in a 4-4-2. They couldn't get near Kroos. And that, for me, that is why they won the Champions League, was Kroos' position.
So is it literally, let's say we've got Atletico Madrid 4-4-2, one person needs to come out of that defensive shape to press onto Toni Kroos, and that opens up a world of pain behind you. Is that what we're saying?
That's kind of what we're saying. You know, as soon as, if Real Madrid can bypass your midfield, you're in trouble. You've got Ronaldo's movement, you've got Benzema coming to the ball, Isco fantastic on the ball, and that's the thing. You step out, you go and press Kroos. He's already passed past you. I'd say Kroos is a player that's actually press resistant because he's so good 1-touch, 2-touch, 3-touch. He'll receive it and he'll move it. So if you go to press him, he's just already played around you, and now you've got Isco in between the lines and you're like, well, we're done here. And I think that was the key thing for Real Madrid in the run to the final, the teams they played, the 4-4-2s that they just completely destroyed, and Atletico, Juve, all playing 4-4-2, and it was fantastic.
One final question then on, I suppose, one player in particular, Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, he's been at the top of the game now for a decade, let's say. How has his role evolved in Zidane's systems?
So I think it's, you know, at the start, obviously, was this wide player, still getting on the ball, still driving from that left position, still creating things for himself. But I think as he's developed, as we can sort of see on the graphics, is he's moved to more of a traditional striking position. And that's kind of where he's playing his sort of better football now. He's not expanding his energy, tracking back, or, you know, running at people. He's literally being in the box, moving to the right area, scoring the goals, the headers that we always see, the finishes. It's the power that he possesses is now as a forward. And that's what we can kind of see. Of course, the one we've not mentioned, the semi-final this season, arguably was slightly away from the diamond shape we've got here and more of a 4-4-2. You see Asensio was dropping into being next to Toni Kroos, and Modric was sort of as a right midfielder. And that's kind of what we're seeing, a 4-3-3, 4-4-2 diamond, then maybe a 4-4-2. I think that's the tactical evolution of both Ronaldo, Zidane and Real Madrid, is all the parts are moving together. And as you mentioned, Ronaldo now sort of at the pinnacle of Real Madrid as the number 9.
So how does Benzema fit into this?
So I think it's, again, Benzema's taken an interesting route from being the guy that's going to be dropping deep, allowing the wide forwards to come in, to being a strike partner, to now arguably drifting to the right-hand side, drifting to the left-hand side, getting away from the penalty area. You know, the game against Bayern Munich, the second leg especially, that goal that I showed you before was, it's the first goal that Real scored, and you probably should go back and watch this because they hold the ball for about a minute, and it's just pure possession for a minute. They switch it, 5 times? Left to right, left to right, left to right. They create that overload out, the 1v1 out wide, Marcelo up against Kimmich. and he crosses and Benzema scores it. But Benzema's position there, he's almost playing as a right winger. For the whole move, he's in a right midfield position, and then he gets into the box. And kind of that's what Benzema's become here, to allow Ronaldo to get into the penalty area. Benzema has to get out of there.
Clear a little bit of space for him. We see it at Liverpool all the time, don't we? So we've done something a little bit different. Anybody on Twitter will know that I love at 11 tagging 11 pass maps. So what we've done actually is we've taken 2 pass maps, one from the Roma first leg for Liverpool, one from the Juve first leg for Madrid, and then we've kind of overlaid them. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the Liverpool one, Dave, and then maybe Real Madrid, and we'll talk about some of the key battles before we go and actually analyse those. I think one of the things that Liverpool have done is Trent and Robertson both play high up the pitch, and we saw earlier the stats actually, it's very, very similar how many times we attack down the right to how many times we attack down the left. Henderson's obviously the deeper of the 3 midfielders, Milner and Wijnaldum. Firmino's dropping into that space. Salah is the guy who is always the furthest player forward, apart from maybe 2 of the last 8 games where we've switched it to Mane. But I think that was tactical based on the team that we were playing. Interestingly, Mane's position, you would think it would be wide left, but he's starting to come inside now and playing into a little bit more of a 10 role. And he looks to be thriving over the last few weeks, and I wonder how Real Madrid are going to counter-attack that, but we'll see some of that when we come on to it, Dave. What about Madrid?
So Madrid, I think this was the Juve game. They actually played well in the first leg. I thought they did well on the ball. Again, it was, you've got Isco. He wasn't kind of playing as this false 9. He was more playing from the left-hand side coming in. But you see, like Sadio Mane's position, he's very central. He's looking to get behind Ronaldo. He's looking to feed him. Bale's staying very naturally wide on the right-hand side. But the similar thing with Liverpool, it's all about the fullbacks getting high. And that is the key, and it's the balance, having someone like Casemiro to go in there. The big thing, though, Modric seems to be the guy that turns up on the big occasions. And his protection of the centre-half behind him, and as well the protection behind Carvalho, to the side of Carvalho in the press, but also in a defensive transition, is really, really important. But again, this rail shape, it's definitely evolved from last season, because last season you would have definitely seen 2 centre-forwards, 1 guy in behind. And it's that evolution that Zidane has done again of his team. They've been like, look, we've got to be able to beat these guys again. We've got to win the Champions League again. We need to change something. I think with the use of potentially Ronaldo, Bale and Benzema, you could see back to that first Champions League. And that, to me, would suggest an absolute shootout, because both sides playing the 4-3-3. Liverpool going to look to counter-attack, going to look to gegenpress them, but equally Real Madrid have got the quality to be able to play through that press, and if they play through that press, we could be in trouble because of Robertson's position and Trent's position. We'll actually look at this now where we've overlaid it. Real Madrid is shooting this way, Liverpool is shooting up the screen there. What jumps out at you straight away when you looked at that? I think the first thing is the fullbacks, isn't it? That's where the battle is going to happen. It is out wide. You're looking at Robertson, Carvalho. And in Liverpool's half, crucially. Yeah, again, that's why Real play the way they are. They transition into almost a 2-3-2-3 with the ball, which is, Zidane's kind of inverted the pyramid and switched it from a WM to an MW. That's a bit too far for this show right now. But the big thing is that battle. And again, it's if Marcelo can get isolated on Trent, like we can see in the visualisation, that's going to be where the game is won and lost. As well, I think the midfield battle is going to be fascinating. I think playing the likes of Toni Kroos up against someone like Wijnaldum, could it be a man-to-man job? Probably won't be. It'll be a zonal thing, I imagine, because Klopp does do that. But maybe it'll be geared a little bit towards being like, how do we stop Toni Kroos? How do we finish him off here? I think the other interesting side is the position of obviously Roberto Firmino and Mo Salah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think from my perspective, I'm looking at the Trent Marcelo exactly the same thing, but I'm also looking at Kroos and Isco being so close to him. We saw Liverpool had to deal in the Champions League quarter-final against Manchester City with Leroy Sané, David Silva taking up a position between Dejan Lovren and Trent Alexander-Arnold, and we dealt with it well, and it was all about the midfielders, and actually in the beginning of that game it was Alexander-Arnold, but we got too defensive, we couldn't break out, and then Henderson came over, and that was the key thing for me. No, I completely agree. I think that was the thing. I think City were massively in the ascendant with that, almost that triangle of those 2 players. Silva kept on running inside, Sané would pull you wide, and you had that bit real problem, but the adaptation of the system with Henderson was fantastic. And again, he may have to do that with whoever's going to be out there, whether it's going to be Kroos, Ronaldo, Marcelo, or it's going to be Kroos, Isco, Marcelo, or even Asensio comes in there. There's going to be some midfielder play that's going to have to come and get involved, because if you can stop that left-hand side of Real Madrid, you stop Real Madrid.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? And one of the ways that we can do that is by this high position of Mo Salah. You know, if he's going up against, in this instance, it's Vallejo, it'll probably be Ramos in the Champions League final, won't it? Unfortunately for us, Ramos is one of the best centre-backs in space in world football, as well as being one of the best centre-backs in world football. You know, his tackling ability in those wide areas. Coming from earlier on in his career, he was a full-back, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So he's used to having to tackle in space, which is something that you could argue that Lovren and Van Dijk are getting better at. You know, that Van Dijk's very good at it. Lovren's improved, but coming from that low block Southampton defence with 4 defenders, 2 defensive midfielders.
Protection.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not something they had to deal with. He's got better at that, but you do still see the odd error from him. Other than that, I think Milner's position will drop a little bit deeper so that we're looking maybe more like where Luka Modric is. Obviously, Klopp was a massive fan of Arrigo Sacchi back in the 90s, you know, those AC Milan sides. That's where he stole the zonal mark and blueprint for this Liverpool side and that Dortmund side from. So we will see zonal, I think you're right on that. But I think Mane could be the really interesting piece of the puzzle here because, you know, the way that he's going to be cutting inside, yes, Casemiro's going to be there, but Roberto Firmino's going to be tracking back, and Roberto Firmino's got this little move, just like Adam Lallana, where they jump round someone to tackle them. Yeah. That was a nice little move, wasn't it? And I think the Firmino and Mane being close to Casemiro could be where Liverpool get a little bit of joy.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Firmino thing's going to be interesting because if Ramos does what Ramos does, he usually breaks out the defence. They'll drop to a 3 and a 1, where Ramos will be as a defensive midfielder. He'll step out and he'll deal with centre forward dropping in, or if anyone dribbling at him and jump out. Problem with that is then you've got Mo Salah that's making that angle on Marcelo. So if Ramos stays, he's dealing with Salah, which is probably what you kind of want. As you mentioned, so good at defending space. Similar with Rafa Varane, both of them. That's one of the reasons why Real have been so successful, is because they're so comfortable at doing that. And you don't see that in European football. It's difficult to do that. As you mentioned, Varane is absolutely rapid, and Ramos used to be a fullback, so very comfortable in those areas. And it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that front three. Sadio Mane's been the really interesting one because arguably he's been a little bit frustrating in front of goal. Like, he's had some really big chances in the Champions League and he's kind of missed them. Yeah. So obviously taken some of them, but could be another thing where, you know, Carvajal's coming back from injury. Vasquez has played there in the last Champions League game. Is he going to be fit? It's going to be a hamstring thing. If I were Liverpool, I'd be targeting that right-hand side from the get-go, just to see whether his hamstring's got it, whether you can put balls in behind him, if it's from Trent and your long cross ball, just seeing whether he can spin and he can go, because if he comes off injured, the thing that Bayern did quite well against Real Madrid was overload that side with, they had David Alaba and Ribery. Ribery would come deep and it would pull Vasquez out, and Modric would try and drop in behind and cover. But Modric has never played fullback in his life, looked massively out of his depth there. And again, if Liverpool can do that with Robertson, with Sadio Mane down that left-hand side, if Mane's coming into the number 10 as we see, pulling in Vasquez if Dani Carvajal's gone off, got a problem. But if Carvajal's in, you've got one of the best fullbacks in world football. So it is one of these things where I'd test him.